Picture being surrounded by people who seem like you can trust them, but then you find out they're the ones making you feel uneasy. Now, what if I tell you about 9 types of people who, even though they may seem trustworthy, aren't worthy of your trust and respect? Learning about these types could really help you improve your relationships. As a smart person once said, it takes 20 years to build a reputation and just 5 minutes to ruin it. Trust is super important in all relationships, whether it's with friends, family, or people you know. But what happens if you put your trust in the wrong people? Today, we're going to talk about 9 kinds of people who might not be the best to trust and respect. We're not here to judge anyone. It's just about being careful about who you let into your life. Before we dive in, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe our channel, and ring the notification bell to let us know you're finding value in our content. Let's go on this journey together and figure out how to not only protect our trust, but also keep our peace of mind. Let's talk about the first type of person, the manipulative individual. These folks are experts at trickery, weaving webs of lies and playing with people's emotions. They might seem friendly and caring, but inside, they're only thinking about themselves. Their manipulation isn't always obvious, they're sneaky about it. To spot them, watch out for inconsistencies in what they say and do. They may promise a lot, but never follow through. Also, pay attention to how they talk about others. If they're always saying bad things behind people's backs, they might do the same to you. Manipulators use tactics like making you feel guilty, making you doubt yourself, and playing the victim to control you. They're good at twisting the truth to make themselves look good. Dealing with them can leave you feeling drained, undervalued, or confused. Trust your instincts. If you feel this way after being around someone, they might be manipulative. The key to dealing with them is setting clear boundaries. Make it known what's okay and what's not in your interactions with them. Don't hesitate to say no or ask questions if things don't add up. It's also important to keep your distance emotionally. Don't rely on them for support or share personal stuff with them. Sometimes cutting ties with manipulators is the best move, especially if they're causing you harm. It's tough, especially if they're close to you, but taking care of your mental health comes first. In stoicism, we learn to face reality as it is, not as we want it to be. Recognizing someone's manipulative behavior helps us make smart choices about our relationship with them. Moving on from manipulators opens us up to better, more honest relationships where trust is valued. Stay tuned for the next type of person in our journey, where we'll keep learning about human relationships. Let's talk about the second type of person, the perpetual critic. These are the folks who always find something to complain about. They nitpick everything and everyone, from your choices to your dreams. Even the small stuff doesn't escape their criticism. But what's really troubling about perpetual critics is why they're so negative-y. Often, it's because they're dealing with their own issues like fears or feeling let down. So, how do you deal with them? Well, first, you've got to tell the difference between helpful criticism, which is meant to improve things, and hurtful criticism, which just puts you down. Pay attention to why they're criticizing you. If it's always negative and not helpful, it's best to keep your distance. Spending time with perpetual critics can be exhausting. It's like pouring water into a leaky bucket. No matter how much you put in, it's never enough. Remember, in stoicism, we learn to focus on what we can control. You can't stop them from being negative, but you can control how you react. Setting boundaries is important. Let them know you're open to helpful feedback, but you won't tolerate unnecessary negativity. If they keep at it, it might be best to spend less time with them. Your happiness and self-respect matter too much to be brought down by constant criticism. In short, dealing with perpetual critics teaches us to respect ourselves and stay strong. By not letting their negativity get to use, we keep our inner peace. As we keep going on our journey, let's remember to choose which criticism to take seriously and which to ignore. Next up, we'll learn about the third type of person as we keep exploring and learning from Stoic wisdom. Let's talk about the third type of person, the fair weather friend. These are the folks who are all friendly and happy when things are going well. But when things get tough for you, they're nowhere to be found. Their friendship is like a fair weather, here when the sun is shining but gone when it rains. Fair weather friends may seem great when things are going smoothly. They're charming and make you feel close to them. But when you really need them, they're not there. They're around for the good times, the parties, and when everything's going right. But they disappear when you're facing challenges and need someone to lean on. Spotting a fair weather friend can be tricky, especially when everything's fine. But pay attention to how they react when you're going through a rough patch. Do they avoid talking about it, come up with excuses, or just vanish until everything's okay again? If so, they're likely a fair weather friend. Dealing with them means being open-hearted but cautious. It's okay to enjoy their company, but don't rely on them for support or share your deepest feelings with them. In Stoicism, we learn to value our inner strength. Depending too much on fair-weather friends can leave you unprepared for life's challenges. So, enjoy the good times with them, but also have other friends who will stick by you through thick and thin. These are the ones who truly deserve your trust and respect. As we move on from fair-weather friends, we'll soon discover the fourth type of person on our journey. Each person we meet teaches us something important about ourselves and the world around us. Stick around as we keep learning from these insightful experiences. Let's talk about the fourth type of person, the gossip monger. This is someone who loves spreading rumors and talking about other people's business. They thrive on gossip, sharing stories that might not even be true. Their conversations are full of he said, she said, with lots of details about others' lives that they shouldn't be sharing. Gossip mongers act like they know everything, but really, they gossip because of their own issues. Maybe they want attention, feel superior, or just want to take the focus off their own lives. Talking to a gossip monger is risky. You might get caught up in their rumors and it could hurt your reputation too. Remember, if they gossip to you, they'll probably gossip about you too. So, how do you deal with them? Don't add fuel to their fire. Be careful about what you tell them, and don't join in when they start gossiping. If they gossip to you, try changing the subject or excuse yourself politely. In Stoicism, we're taught to focus on our own actions and virtues instead of gossiping about others. This helps us keep our integrity and stay mentally peaceful. As we move past the gossip monger, let's remember to have conversations that lift us up and make a positive impact on our lives and those around us. Next, we'll explore another interesting personality type on our journey of understanding and learning. Let's talk about the fifth type of person, the narcissist. These folks are all about themselves. They might seem charming and likable at first, but deep down, they only care about themselves. They see relationships as a way to boost their own ego and get what they want. They don't really think about other people's feelings or needs. When you're around a narcissist, you might feel like you're always giving them support and admiration, but they don't give much back. It's hard to spot a narcissist because they're good at making themselves look good, but you'll notice it when they don't show empathy or only talk about themselves. Dealing with narcissists means you need to know your own worth and set clear boundaries. Don't expect them to treat you with respect or understand your feelings. In Stoicism, we learn to focus on our own values and not let others' actions bother us. This is important when dealing with narcissists. By keeping your distance emotionally and not taking their behavior personally, you can protect your mental well-being. As we move on from dealing with narcissists, we keep learning about ourselves and others. Join us next time as we explore another type of person that might be affecting your life without you even realizing it. Let's talk about the sixth type of person, the flatterer. These people are really good at giving compliments and making others feel special. But watch out, because their flattery usually has a hidden agenda. They use praise to get in your good books, get what they want, or manipulate situations in their favor. At first, it might feel nice to hear all those nice things about yourself, but it's important to figure out if they're being genuine or just trying to butter you up. Flatterers tend to go overboard with their compliments, and although it might sound good, it can feel fake or exaggerated. The problem with dealing with a flatterer is that their charm can make you overlook their faults or agree to things you wouldn't normally do. It's important to stay grounded and not let their flattery mess with your judgment. To handle interactions with a flatterer, take what they say with a pinch of salt. Enjoy the compliments, but don't fully trust them. Watch what they do, because actions speak louder than words. If you notice they're always giving fake compliments to get something from you, it's a sign to rethink your relationship with them. In Stoicism, we're reminded to value honesty and sincerity over empty praise. Stoics teach us to find our worth from within, not from what others say about us. By not depending on the praise of others, especially from flatterers, we keep our independence and self-respect. As we wrap up our chat about flatterers, get ready to learn about the 7th type of person in our next talk. Each person we meet on this journey teaches us something important about human behavior, and why it's crucial to be careful about who we trust and respect. Let's talk about the 7th type of person, the victim. These folks always feel like life is against them, like they're always getting a bad deal. They paint themselves as the constant loser, blaming everything and everyone except themselves for their problems. While it's important to feel for people going through tough times, the victim makes being a victim a big part of who they are. They use it to get pity from others or to avoid taking responsibility for their actions. Dealing with a victim can be tiring because all they do is complain and blame others. They hardly ever try to fix things themselves, preferring to stay stuck in their misery. When you're around a victim, you need to balance being kind with taking care of yourself. It's good to offer help and advice, but be careful not to get sucked into their negativity. Encourage them to take charge of their life instead of just complaining about it. In Stoicism, we learn to focus on what we can control, our own actions and thoughts. This is important when dealing with victims. We can be there for them, but ultimately, they have to decide to change their situation. As we move on from dealing with victims, we learn that while it's good to be kind, we also need to know when to step back for our own well-being. Let's talk about the 8th type of person, the envious. These folks secretly feel bitter when they see others succeed. They might act nice on the outside, but inside they're jealous and feel like they're not good enough. Envy is tricky because it doesn't always show outright. Envious people might give you compliments that don't feel genuine or try to downplay your achievements. Sometimes they might even try to compete with you or copy what you've done. Not because they're inspired, but because they want to prove they're better. It's hard to spot envy because it hides behind a friendly face. Pay attention to how they react when you do well. Are they genuinely happy for you, or do they seem to find fault in your success? Dealing with envious people requires being confident in yourself. Don't let their jealousy make you feel small or stop you from celebrating your wins. It's okay to share good news with them, but be careful about oversharing. In Stoic philosophy, we learn to focus on our own journey and not let others' negative feelings affect us. Envy says more about them than it does about you. Understanding this helps you interact with envious people without letting their negativity bring you down. As we finish talking about the envious, we're getting ready to talk about the 9th and final type. Each type we've talked about teaches us something important about human behavior and why it's essential to choose our friends wisely. Let's talk about the last type of person, the judgmental. These folks are known for quickly judging others and being harsh about it. They usually have strict views about how things should be and don't like it when others think differently. Judgmental people like to criticize and dismiss others without trying to understand where they're coming from. Dealing with them can be tough because they're not very understanding or open-minded. They might act like they're better than everyone else and that their opinions are the only ones that matter. When you're around judgmental people, watch out for how they react to different ideas. They're usually not willing to listen or have a respectful conversation. The best way to deal with them is to stick to your own beliefs and not let them change your mind. You can agree to disagree without getting into arguments. In Stoic philosophy, we learn to be open-minded and consider different viewpoints. This helps us deal with judgmental people without letting their negativity affect us. As we finish talking about the 9 types of people who might not deserve our trust and respect, remember that it's not about judging others. It's about being aware of who we let into our lives. Each type teaches us something about human nature and why it's important to surround ourselves with positive and supportive people. Thanks for joining us on this journey. Let's use what we've learned to build better relationships and live happier lives. If you found this helpful, share your thoughts in the comments. Your insights help us all grow, and if you haven't already, consider subscribing for more content about philosophy, psychology, and personal development. Keep learning, stay curious, and keep improving yourself and your relationships.